The story begins in this part of the forest. Someone called the name Junghyun and asked if they were friends. There was a man sitting beside the big rock that was full of blood, and he replied to the man calling him that he was a crazy demon bastard and asked how he would stop spouting nonsense. And don't underestimate him, he was the elder of the Wudang Sect, and he knew that right. The man replied that to get a grip, and asked if that was so, why he was so weak and was he really the heavenly demon. The old man was radiant heavenly cult, heavenly demon son Mubarak. The old man was pleading for the man and said that he was the only one he can trust and his granddaughter. The man told him that he was a stupid and asked how the heavenly demon could put his trust in someone. The old man was shocked and crying, and the man told him that until the very end, he was still a nuisance. The man left, and suddenly turned to look at his back and called the kid and wanted to come with him. The kid staggered and turned to look at the man, and the kid was the heavenly demon's granddaughter. The man came closer to the kid and asked if he hadn't seen her in a while, but she was not even greeting him. The little kid was speechless and was just looking at the man, and the man took a deep breath and said that parenting was something he hadn't done before, and to think he had to deal with it at that age. Then he suddenly saw the kid that was crying, then he asked the kid why he was crying and what he had done to her. The kid answered that he didn't like her, because she was his grandfather's granddaughter. He scratched his head and replied that she was just a kid, so she can say anything, and he was thinking that the kid's awareness was faster than that old heavenly demon. And so he reached out his hand to the kid and told her that they will go or she can stay and live there for the rest of her life. The kid suddenly stood up and grabbed the man's clothes and asked if he didn't hate her. The man turned to look at her and grabbed her hand, and the little girl was so sad looking at her grandfather and waving goodbye. The kid was now talking to the man and she said that her name was Sojin and she was not a kid, and the man just answered yes to the kid. As rumors spread that the highest person in the demonic path cult, the heavenly demon, vanished, the world began to forget about the heavenly demon. At the mountain range of Mount Tien, there was a group of people walking and having a carriage. The person at the back of the man that was riding a horse said that it seems they have 4 more days to reach their destination. The man asked if that was so, and that was unfortunate, and they don't have much food left either. The man was being called a great journey leader, was a merchant belonging to a merchant group, tasked with assisting the caravan and managing the leaders. And so the journey leader told the man to give everyone the woolen clothes and let them rest there. In the meantime, they will redistribute the remaining food. He told everyone that they need to set up the tent before it gets too dark, and all of a sudden he heard a laugh, and it was the Sojin called the man a grandpa and wanted them to eat. The man told Sojin not to run and she would get hurt, and the journey leader asked Sojin if she was not bored in the carriage and she was not feeling cold. Sojin answered that time flew by while she was watching outside the window, and thanks to the woolen clothes he gave her, she didn't even feel the cold. And the journey leader answered that he was glad to hear that. About 10 days ago, they happened to encounter a young man and a girl while passing through the Mount Tien Valley. At first they were scared to accept them, because they encountered them in the former territory of the radiant heavenly cult. Nonetheless, the reason for accepting them was the thought that the little girl could go back to her hometown, but the young man was somehow wearing something rare in Junghyun, and he was wearing a taiji robe and carrying a pine pattern ancient sword. And he was thinking that the young man was a disciple of the Wudang Sect. No matter how much the Wudang Sect declined, it was still the Wudang Sect, and he couldn't escape the eyes of Du Shimgi, and he was sure he was somehow a master. Someone called the great journey leader and told it that the meal was ready, and the journey leader answered thank you. While the young man and Sojin were eating, the journey leader and the man were talking, and the man asked the journey leader if he thought those two were kinda weird. The journey leader answered that yes, it was strange how the young man behaves oddly like an old man. But isn't it a bit of an exaggeration to find it strange, and doesn't the kid keep calling him grandpa? And well, there weren't many eccentric Taoists in the Wudang Sect, given that there was even a Sword Calamity there, right? The man was asking about a Sword Calamity, and the journey leader said that a Sword Calamity or a person known by the title Sword Master. A calamity wielding a sword, known as a monster. Decades ago, he was the strongest and worst swordsman born from the Wudang Sect. Wherever he went, chaos and disaster followed, and dozens of sects vanished due to the Sword Calamity, with hundreds being crippled. Even now, the Wudang Sect has not been able to regain its strength due to dealing with the aftermath of the Sword Calamity. But still, for the commoners, he never harmed anyone while upholding justice, so he was truly regarded as a chivalrous hero. The man asked wasn't the Sword Calamity just a rumor, and the journey leader answered that it was a story from 30 years ago, so he might not know about it, and he was still young. And all of a sudden someone called the great journey leader and said that he think he should come over there for a moment, and the journey leader asked what was the matter. The man answered that a group of travelers was coming their way. The man on the front that wear a hat said hello, and he was Shin Myungja from Kunlun. And the people at his back were his juniors, Youngdu, Youngsan and Youngchun, and also Youngwo. The man said that when he saw the light surrounding there, he decided to come right over, even though he knew it would be rude, and asked if they were on their way to Sichuan, may he accompany them. The journey leader was asking about accompanying them, and if it was Kunlun. It was a mysterious sect that was famous in Junghyun. And all of a sudden the journey leader answered yes, they can join them. He suddenly asked his people what they were doing, and they should serve the tourists their meals. The young man said that those Kunlun jerks were trouble if they got involved with them. The journey leader asked the Kunlun senior disciple if they perhaps on his way to the 70th birthday banquet of the Poison King, and the Kunlun senior disciple answered how did he knew. He was on his was as a substitute for the sect leader and almost ended up in a dire situation after getting lost. They were both laughing, and the journey leader said that they were also on their way to the Tang clan territory, so if he doesn't mind they will travel together, and the Kunlun senior disciple replied that if he did that they would be very grateful. He was laughing and saying in his mind that with the young Taoist of Wudang and the swordsman of Kunlun they won't have to worry about the bandits on the road. 5 days later, the man had news to the journey leader and said that one of the disciples of Kunlun suddenly started rummaging through the cargo, and ended up ruining a few pieces of clothing, causing quite a commotion. It was the 5th day since the Kunlun sect joined them. Contrary to what he had heard about their esteemed reputation, they carelessly rummage through the luggage and treat the reins like servants. Ultimately, they got drunk and caused a scene, breaking things and even beating the porters, and because of that, they still haven't arrived for 4 days. At first, because they were from a renowned sect, he thought they wouldn't be so much of a nuisance, but who would have thought? One of the Kunlun junior disciples confronted the journey leader's man, and the man said that if he made that expensive item into a rag like that, its value would drop. The junior disciple asked what he said, and he thought it was his mistake, and how much will that piece of cloth cost? And have he ever thought about how their senior brother was protecting him from bandits, and how he did not express his gratitude and instead belittled them over such a trivial piece of cloth? And does he want to die? The man was so scared and said that it was not like that, and all of a sudden the journey leader said that it cost 1,000 nyang, not just a small amount of silver nyang, but 1,000 gold nyang. So that was what was going on. He was arguing after he damaged merchant goods. The journey leader told the junior disciple that the item was quite expensive and valuable, and it was clearly his fault. The journey leader was thinking that Shin Myungja, he thought he was a trustworthy Taoist, but even when his junior's disciples were causing that chaos, and he was now just looking the other way as if it doesn't concern him. The journey leader said that to the merchant, it was something they prepared by spending their entire fortune, and now it has been ruined in a single day. The junior disciple told his senior brother Youngsan to stop, and the man was getting angry and asked what it was. He was just trying to pick out clothes that would suit Youngwo, but now he was the one who was getting humiliated. And so he took his sword and said that they just looked like thieves in his eyes, and if they were trying to get money from the Kunlun sect. And how dare a lowly merchant like him look down on the Kunlun? And all of a sudden the junior disciple was hurt and hit by the carriage door. And it was the young man's do and told them to shut up. He just put Sojin to sleep, and now he was trying to get some rest. And asked, can't they see, were they going to take responsibility if Sojin wakes up? The junior disciple's nose was bleeding and his co-disciple was worried about him. Junior disciple Youngsan was really angry and said how dare he do that to him, and did he know who he was? The young man was just looking at the junior disciple, and this junior disciple said that the person who was facing senior brother Youngsan had a very calm demeanor, and it seems unlikely that he will win against his senior brother Youngsan. And he was thinking that with senior brother Youngsan being agitated right now, if things go wrong, it could lead to a conflict between sects. And he shouldn't let that happen, he needs to stop them. And so lends her hand to stop them, but Kunlun's great disciple Youngdo told him to let them be. And didn't Youngsan already say it? and it doesn't make sense for a prestigious sect like them to bow just because of a mere piece of cloth getting torn. It was enough to compensate separately later, and that person, he heard, has been honing his sword in the remote area. And if that was true, it would be interesting, and if she was worried about Kunlun's honor, he could step in. If, by any chance, Junghyun were to be defeated, he will step in for the honor of Kunlun, so not to worry. And so he answered yes, and said in his mind that great senior brother seemed to be thinking only of fighting. Well, he was famous for being a battle maniac even within the sect. The elitism where clothes are seen as being in a different position from themselves, the sense of superiority that one was fully qualified to hold a sword and gaze down upon the world in order to embody the Taoism. Such a mindset has led to the decay of sect. She will soon distance himself from those individuals. He lifted up his sword and was going to attack the young man and asked how dare he be a swordsman from the Wudang Sect. The young man was getting annoyed and asked about him being called a mere swordsman of the Wudang Sect. The disciple was going to attack him, but he suddenly blocked the disciple's attack using his sword, and this junior disciple was really shocked and asked what just happened, and his junior brother was on ground beaten down by the young man. The young man was discouraged by the junior and asked what the heck, that piece of shit can only do that much. And it was ridiculous for a kid who isn't fully mature yet to dare say something like that to another swordsman from a different sect. He turned to check Sojin and he was asking if Sojin was not awake, then he saw that Sojin was still sleeping on the carriage. The senior disciple was looking at the young man and he was gritting and suddenly shouted how dare he use such sorcery to take him down. The young man just looked at the disciple and asked what it was this time, and the man shouted that it seems he must be from a treacherous demonic sect, and so he was Kunlun's poison heart brave swordsman. He came closer to the young man and said that he was going to punish him right now and he needed to see the real face hiding behind that mask. He was also thinking that the trick that he used to take down Junghyun must be sorcery. If that were not the case, he, who had reached the pinnacle of greatness, wouldn't have missed it. And he just want to fight him because he seems to have something. After getting into a dispute with Junghyun, there was justification for him to intervene. And he must definitely be a cunning and malevolent being. He will catch him and raise his reputation. And so he uses flying dragons chasing lightning, great void slaughter dragon sword technique. But the young man just choked him like a little dragon, and all of them were really shocked and said that the Wudang Sect guy caught the great disciple of Kunlun's great void slaughter dragon sword technique with his bare hands, and how was that possible? The young man asked how he used that sword technique and called himself a swordsman, and then suddenly shouted and asked why all of them were so annoying. And this man was really shocked and said that the young man broke the cloud dragon sword, the sacred treasure that the Kunlun sect had revered for over 500 years, shattered with just a single gesture. The young man said that it has been a long time, but they didn't change at all, and asked if it was their tradition. And he suddenly punched the man's face and it was hurt and tumbled into the ground. And then the two other juniors of the Kunlun sect were going to attack and were behind the young man, and the young man was really relaxed and asked if they wanted to get beaten up also. He just took his sword and it flew up and attacked the two other juniors, and the sword came back to his hand. The junior disciple was shocked and thought that it was the QI technique, and all of a sudden the senior disciple said that it was the QI burst sword. It was a technique of wielding a sword freely in the air, a technique that even the most supreme masters wouldn't dare to attempt. Looks young on the outside, but there was still a possibility he was an aged master from a previous generation. And all of a sudden the senior disciple told the young man to stop, and he was kneeling on the ground and said sorry for not respecting him earlier. He was sorry for making him feel offended and pleaded for the sake of Kunlun, forgive those immature disciples. The young man was shocked and asked what for the sake of Kunlun. The senior was shocked and the young man asked if he didn't know him. The senior was staggered and the young man told him that looking at his reaction, he seemed to have forgotten, and the senior was asking who the hell he was. Judging by the way he speaks, it seems that he should know who he was. And all of a sudden he remembered something, that it was the past that he was trying to forget. About 30 years ago, there was an incident where an old man was wearing the tattered robes of the Wudang Sect uniform. Knocked down the highest master in Kunlun, the soaring clear crane, the Kunlun sect leader, and also over 50 disciples. After all those years, that madman's smile was still haunting him, and he was sure it was him. The greatest and worst master of the Wudang Sect. Then he suddenly asked if he was the Sword Calamity. The young man answered that it was pretty good, and asked if he was his friend and didn't he tell him back then to call him Sword Immortal. The senior was hurt and called the young man a Sword Immortal elder, and Sojin heard the noise. Then she suddenly woke up and the young man told the senior that he won't stop until he remembers it. Sojin stood up and was about to cry and the senior was pleading to stop and he was wrong, and the young man replied that it was too late. The senior disciple was kneeling and raising his hand up and saying in his mind that he hadn't seen him in Junghyun for over 30 years. He never expected that person would appear so youthful because he used a rejuvenation technique. If he had known that, he should have intervened when the dispute first started. Assuming it would just blow over was his mistake. The young man suddenly pinned the man on the chest using his sword and asked if that silk was from Pasa Kingdom and with that it should be enough to cover the cost of the silk, and since its energy was suppressed, there shouldn't be any dangerous consequences. The senior suddenly shouted that the Cloud Dragon sword was a sacred treasure of the Wudang Sect, a symbol of Kunlun. The young man was really angry and asked what he did about it and if he had properly taken care of his subordinates from the start, and none of that would have happened. The person at the back said that she was not sure she can accept that, and the young man asked why and was that not enough and would she want to take the rest, and the woman answered not and it was too expensive. The young man asked what kind of merchant she was to have such a principle, considering the remaining money as compensation for the mental suffering that she got because of those trashed. The journey leader said sorry to intrude and called the young man a Lord Sword Immortal, and the young man suddenly said that by the way, he was ashamed of himself and he arrived just in time. And there was the compensation for running his belongings, and the journey leader said that he was accompanied by the world's best swordsman, Sword Immortal, and asked how could he possibly accept that. And he said additionally that with all due respect, he was sorry, but what about he can think of that money as his payment because he escorted them, Lord Sword Immortal. Though, he was not sure if that amount was enough for someone like him, and he will be traveling a long way with his granddaughter in the future and he will need plenty of money. Sojin came out to the carriage and called his grandpa and happily said that the dandelion seeds flew into the carriage. He just smiled and said and asked in his mind that his name was Du Shimgi, right? And he flattered him while seemingly looking out for Sojin as well. Then he suddenly told the journey leader that he was so good at doing business and his merchant group name was Heaven Blue Merchant Group, and asked if he was right. He threw back the money to the journey leader and said that he didn't seriously think he could hire Minute with only that much, and he wanted the journey leader just to take it and think of it as he was making an investment with that money. The journey leader replied he understood, then he would make sure the other merchant remained quiet about his arrival, Lord Sword Immortal, and the young man replied that it was good. Then he suddenly asked that anyway, what should he do about those? It was bothersome to keep dragging them with him, but if he leave them be, there might start a rumor about him, and he was thinking and asking would he just cut them off and carry them on his shoulder. The senior was really scared and he was pleading don't. Then he saw the young man was looking at them with that agonizing look and he was asking if there was no way, because he was a Sword Immortal, and not tell him he might do that. And all of a sudden the young man uses his hand to lift up all the juniors, and the senior said that it was impossible. He can't believe he didn't even need to touch to lift him up in the air and just use one of his fingers, and isn't it an object absorbing technique? Not only that, but true QI attract guiding technique as well. But only the external wounds had been treated, the QI veins, bones and dantian were still damaged. And he hasn't completely lost his martial powers, but it seems he won't be able to use his internal energy for a while until he fully recovers. The young man turned to look at the journey leader and said that the porter must be exhausted, and make them share their luggage when they wake up. The journey leader answered all right, and the young man said additionally that originally, the more prestigious the sect, the more they were meant to share the hardship of the people. And he was going to feed Sojin, so give him some snacks, and the journey leader replied that he understood, and the senior disciple of Kunlun was mesmerizing in his mind that terrifying person seems to cherish that kid a lot, and he never heard the rumor that the Sword Immortal had a child and asked who the hell is she then. A few days after that series of events, in the wilderness of northern Mount Tien, they were still traveling. They were really tired and asked by herself how many days have passed, and she wondered when they would come across an inn to rest, and all of a sudden her senior brother shouted that he can't go any further. His junior sister asked if it was hard for him, right, and did he want to share his luggage with her. Her senior brother answered that it was not. After fainting and waking up, his QI pulse had become completely messed up and he can't even ride in the carriage, and he even have to help with the merchant luggage. The junior brother at the back wanted his great senior brother to say something, and the great senior brother answered that he still didn't realize even though he had experienced it. And all of a sudden a sword struck him in the face and they were really shocked, and that sword was from the sword immortal, and there was no way, the carriage he was riding in much further ahead. And she was asking how can he hear the senior brother's voice, and can he really launch a QI burst and hit the senior's brother with it? Even her master, who was the greatest among martial artists that she has encountered, wouldn't be able to catch a sound from such a distance, and he was a master of such caliber that it is beyond estimation. The sword immortal was looking at her and mesmerizing that among those Kunlun's disciples, that folks was the best one, and she was quite perceptive and has decent control over QI and breathing technique. Moreover, it seems she excels particularly in energy detection. If she continues to develop in that direction, she could bear the future of Kunlun. He didn't know who she was, but it seems that his master had raised her pretty well. Sojin was yawning and his grandfather saw her and asked if she was already sleepy, and look at how she was yawning, she might tear her mouth from opening it so wide. And then suddenly Du Shimgi called the sword immortal and said that he brought some sweets for Sojin, and the Lord Sword Immortal happily said that he came at the right time. The man said that it must be a tough journey for a little girl like Sojin, and while the Lord Sword Immortal was feeding Sojin, he was telling in his mind that the Lord was amazing and he never thought he would meet a sword immortal in person. Although it was his appearance with his rejuvenating technique, one thing that concerns him was how the sword had been missing for a long time, and will react when he learns about the current stage of the Wudang Sect. And he wonders if that will cause an upside down in Junghyun or not. At a time when the prolonged peace had led to extreme conflicts among various factions with the emergence of the sword immortal, may the Wudang Sect rise to prominence once again. In times of such upheaval, large sums of money often can change hands, and he was asking himself, should he send a warning to those who form an alliance against Wudang? Or perhaps it would be wise to strengthen ties with Sword Calamity now, aiming to reap significant rewards later. Then the Lord Sword Immortal called him and asked if they shall start spreading the word that they will be arriving at the city soon. Du Shimgi was staggered, and so he announced to everyone and said that he knew they were tired, but please endure a little more and they will speed up from now on. And soon they arrived at the city with a dazzling night, and they were entering Uremi. Uremi was one of the few big cities in the meadow, a night city where the stars cannot be seen at night. Unbreakable lanterns light up the city, as numerous trade caravans come and go along the northern road of Mount Tien, and it was not difficult for anyone to find an inn to stay in. That's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel for more content like this. Until next time.